The Last Guardian is finally here. After beginning development in 2007, the game had a rocky journey until finally releasing in December of 2016. The Last Guardian is the third in a series of games designed and directed by Fumito Ueda. His two previous games, Ico and Shadow of the Colossus, went on to receive critical acclaim and are commonly considered classics of the medium. Shadow of the Colossus in particular is a beloved game to me. Ueda's games are built on the concept of design by subtraction, a philosophy where non-essential components are stripped away until you're left with a really focused work. His stories are minimalistic, mysterious, and dripping with character. The game also features oversaturated lighting and a sparse colour palette, and have an affinity for presenting environments large in scale. Fumito Ueda is one of gaming's truest auteurs. The Last Guardian follows the adventure of a young boy, whisked away to a strange valley known as the Nest. He comes into contact with a strange griffin-like creature, and the pair team up to escape. The relationship between the young boy and the beast Trico is lovingly developed throughout the course of the game. The entire game carries the unique feeling that Ueda's previous games do, rich in atmosphere and tone. The game is ostensibly a platformer, with a highly structured path through the environment. However, unlike a lot of platformers, the acrobatics are physics-based in a way few other similar games attempt. The boy's movements are influenced by real-time physics, and as such he has a realism to his animation that has a distinct feel. For some, this might make the action feel clunky or unresponsive, but much like in Ico and Shadow of the Colossus, this is a very deliberate decision. Creating acrobatics that lack a lot of the finesse of a standard action platformer serves to reinforce the nature of the young child's lack of any particular proficiency. He controls like a real-life person, basically. In a similar way to how classic horror game Tank controls served to take some degree of power away from the player, the physicality of the boy's motion creates the same sense of fragility. I can't believe I've spoken this long without going into detail on easily the greatest strength of the game. Trico is an incredible creature. Throughout the game, Trico serves as a powerful ally, but he's not without his own weaknesses. Trico is a highly maneuverable creature, but he behaves in the manner of a traumatized dog. The boy, and by extension the player, treat Trico with love and care, and Trico provides aid wherever he can. One interesting aspect of the game is that Trico is himself a puzzle. Trico acts both as the primary puzzle for the player, as well as their reason to keep pushing forward, and I think that's something pretty special. Trico requires support from the player, necessary help in order to progress, and that's a difficult line to walk in a video game. Escort quests, as they're commonly known, are a much maligned system in video games. They are a painful way to take control away from the player, particularly the way they're commonly used, as short strolls behind a slow-moving NPC interspersed by combat sequences. They really grate on the player. The Last Guardian certainly matches an escort quest in form, however in function, Trico's antics create a connection to the character far stronger than any purely scripted events could manage. In stark contrast to most NPC companions, the player depends on Trico just as much as Trico depends on you. Trico is essentially a puppy. He has some level of intelligence, but he appreciates guidance. He's necessary to progress through the environment, but he's hampered by glass eye panels and his appetite. He's a destructive force when thrust into combat, but he requires a compassionate touch to calm his nerves afterwards. And these sorts of interactions form the bulk of The Last Guardian. Trico is an exceptional achievement for video game AI. Trico displays various eccentricities that really make him feel like a living creature. There are really too many to list, but things like the way his ears twitch, and how he wanders off and explores areas at his own pace, really set a powerful connection to this beautiful creature. Trico really sells the game, but other parts of The Last Guardian are not without merit. The game features a number of exhilarating action set pieces. They are far more obviously scripted than other parts of the game, but they give just enough control to work really effectively. The game's physics engine also adds to the excitement of these moments, with the way things move and react to what's going on. It's worth mentioning that the game's pacing really flows brilliantly. The game starts very slowly, but once the first glass eye set piece kicks into gear, the game has a steady flow between these high intensity moments, quiet reflective ones, and puzzle segments. All in all, the game's platforming is actually really fun. I even started a second playthrough to relive some of the great platforming segments. The boy's movement is weighty and solid, and the game's environments allow for a good level of acrobatic play. The game is not without its issues, however. The most significant of these is the game's camera controls. The camera in The Last Guardian feels like a relic from the PS2 era, which makes sense considering the game's tumultuous development. The camera is incredibly fiddly in tight spaces, particularly when riding Trico near any roof or archway. It rarely gets in the way of pivotal moments, so much as being a nuisance, but it really lessens the feel of the experience when the camera is so uncooperative. It does work well enough to get by, it's just a shame it doesn't move a little bit more fluidly and can't be settled a little further away for the benefit of those tighter spaces. Another complaint I've heard brought up in discussion of the game is its general controls. Like I described earlier, the game is built on a different movement and animation system than a lot of other games, and those who haven't experienced the prior games in the series might find it to be a bit too different for their liking. Ultimately, I found the controls to work just fine, and appreciated the way the button placement of the face keys worked the same way for controlling the boy as giving Trico the corresponding guidance. One area I think the controls faltered is with the lack of a hold to grip function. The boy automatically grips to surfaces in The Last Guardian, which sometimes leads to such annoyances as it being surprisingly difficult to dismount Trico's back without face planting. The previous game in the series, Shadow of the Colossus, avoided these pitfalls by having the grab button be held down for the duration of the time you want to cling, which would have worked well here, even without needing the other game's stamina system. So I personally had very little issue with the game's controls, but I can't exactly speak for everyone here. The most technical issue in The Last Guardian is its frame rate. In high action segments, the frame rate occasionally drops. This was never really an issue for me. This isn't a game necessitating the same level of precision as a fighter, for example, but they were definitely noticeable. Trico's AI interacting with the game's environmental puzzles can sometimes lead to issues too, and these are definitely the most worthy of criticism. For all the strength of Trico's AI, he isn't perfect. In my first playthrough, I encountered two pretty awful moments of the gameplay falling apart. It's possible that other sections could trouble others, but these two moments were just painful for me. The first is the lake crate puzzle. Essentially, you fall into a small lake, and only have a small crate available to push into the water. Trico is stuck above the lake beyond the roofing of wooden planks. I could not figure out how to get out. I actually had to consult a walkthrough, which explained I had to push the crate through the water to a certain plank out of a bunch of them, with zero signposting, and wait for Trico to extend his tail down into the room. I now knew what to do, but it still took several minutes for Trico to finally dislodge his tail from the planks beside a hole. What made this so irritating was the lack of direction for the puzzle. It was clear what had to be done, but getting the event to activate was where the trouble came in. The second event was when I could just not get Trico to dive underwater and through a gate. This one more or less speaks for itself. I wanted Trico to dive, so I gave him the dive guidance that had worked in the previous room, but he kept leaving to climb up a cliff before jumping back down into the water. I finally tried a different method of tricking him into diving under, then gripping on mid-dive, but this single room took me over 20 minutes. It is immensely frustrating when the solution is entirely obvious, but getting your companion to execute on that is nigh impossible. So while I reject a lot of the criticisms around Trico's behaviour, there are definitely times when the game refuses to cooperate, basically by chance. With that said, once you understand Trico's behaviour, he's very easy to guide. Of course, I have no doubt that other people did experience legitimate bugs with the game. What was interesting for me was I had a far easier time working with Trico on repeat plays, having figured out his eccentricities on my first playthrough. Early on, he might seem like he responds randomly to you, but after working together with him for a while, you definitely figure out how he ticks. The game rewards a greater understanding of your companion and his needs and wants, and so for those who can handle the possibility of any niggling issues, The Last Guardian is well worth it. Trico is a wonderfully realised creature, the most impressive partner companion I've come across in the medium. The game flows organically from set piece to set piece, but also finds time for ample quiet moments for the relationship between the two companions to grow. The game's plot offers intrigue and a fascinating environment to explore. The audio and visual design is also terrific. The Last Guardian is a game which really lives up to the legacy of its predecessors. The same complaints can be made of this game as the previous two, with its camera showing the length of the game's troubled development most clearly. Physics-based movement and animation can be jarring for those used to precision platformer controls, but as with Ueda's prior works, this is a deliberate decision made to humanize the protagonist. On top of this, the controls aren't even bad, merely clumsy in places. There are distinct bugs and puzzle missteps, and Trico can be a little too unhelpful at times when you have a clear solution in mind. But when taken as a whole, these issues wash away as you make your way through the deeply affecting and captivating journey with your newfound cat bird dog Trico. And it's a game that crafts a powerfully enchanting creature in Trico. In those simple moments when he snatches a thrown barrel out of the air, or you realize you can brush the blood off his fur, or when he flips you up onto his back with his mouth, you're really not going to be caring about the game's camera or a slow frame rate. Trico isn't your subordinate, your pet. He's his own being with his own motivations, and you have to respect that. I think that's a powerful relationship to foster, and one that rarely exists in this medium. Taking control away from the player is broadly considered a bad design decision, but Trico works so well as a believable creature because of this exact lack of direct control. I'm far more won over by a game trying something truly memorable and emotionally resonant, albeit with its fair share of technical missteps. The Last Guardian is a pure, unabashedly heartwarming experience, and one that will undoubtedly stick with those that embark on this journey of boy and beast. It's an experience of unadulterated beauty, and a blissful tale of overcoming communication barriers and living in coexistence with others. The Last Guardian is utterly enchanting. Trico is utterly enchanting. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Feel free to like, comment, or subscribe, and I've got a Twitter set up now, actually, if you want to hear about progress on any of my videos and such things like that. Anyways, have a good day, and I'll see you later.